Welcome back. Welcome back. It's Ed Martin here in the Pro-America Report, and with us now is the pro-Americanist man of the hour, John Schlafly, one half of the Schlafly Report, which publishes over at our sister site, townhall.com, each Tuesday late in the afternoon. And this week's column is called Unmasking the COVID Fear Factor. So, John, you are, in fact, a senior citizen. Are you afraid of getting COVID?
Well, I've engaged in pretty much social distancing my whole life, and so it's nothing new to me. I'm not really a good test of that, but
you're like a conservative monk, a monastic existence. Okay, then we'll move off of that. All right, forget about that. Now, in this column you have here, and what about this? I've heard a lot of people telling me that President Trump, he needs to be careful, that it's a little bit too hardline, kind of disregard to never wear a mask. And what are your I'm not talking about whether you should or shouldn't wear a mask. I'm saying, are we at a point where a lot of people think you should wear a mask? Is that a waste of time? Well, I don't think it's a waste of time, but should it be a test of what's going on? Should people use masks? What do you think about that right now?
Well, the whole issue of a mask, and we had a play on words in the column about unmasking the fear factor, but suddenly it's becoming a political thing. And just to pick an example, the Democratic mayor of St. Louis is just issuing a citywide order that everyone has to wear a mask. I don't know how she's going to enforce that in certain neighborhoods, but because that's sweeping the country now. And we were hearing people complain that Trump doesn't wear a mask. Obviously, Joe Biden wears a mask, and it's unfair that Trump can speak to the nation and Joe Biden chooses not to. So You can see where this is going. And, we went for the first month or two of this, and there was a debate among Dr. Fauci and all the other so-called experts about whether there was any value in even wearing a mask. And people said, no, there's no value in wearing a mask. People said that, and then they changed their mind about that. And now they're saying, they want everybody to wear a mask, but even if it's not an N95 mask. So I don't know what to say. And then you have the Antifa people who wear black masks as part of their, in an effort to keep their faces from being caught on the cameras when they're looting stores. So this whole business about masks, and of course, there are laws in certain that date back to the Ku Klux Klan about forbidding the wearing of masks in public. And how does that fit into this whole issue? So,
well, it is extraordinary. It's extraordinary to say this. I thought one of the solutions to the Antifa, last year was enforce those laws that make it so you can see their faces, so you can prosecute them. Now you have everybody can wear a mask and be and be unknown. I mean, I guess maybe there's some technologies that can look sort of through at your eyes and things. But you're right about that, John. Back to one thing on this. I know you write about it, and your fellow columnist Andy Schlafly is really an expert on this. But I do want to touch on it. The hydroxychloroquine, which is this drug that's been around for 50 years or 75 years, used for malaria related, at least some of the chloroquine is used for some other autoimmune diseases to some effect. In other words, the reason I say all that is they know the side effects. You don't grow 3 heads when you use it. You don't have cancer complications. Some people have some GI issues and maybe some headaches, but it's very manageable. And yet, Andy Schlafly has been arguing from his perspective. He works with some physicians through the American Association of American Physicians and Surgeons that, why not use this as prophylaxis? Others are. I think it was the president of Peru, maybe, or one of the smaller Latin American countries. He said, yeah, we're on it. They told us to be on it prophylactically. And trust me, all the leaders are. President Trump tried it. John, what's your feeling on it? Is it, again, a political football? Has it been sort of
football? Yeah. And obviously President Trump used it prophylactically. Now, of course, that means the president is, we're told, was never infected and never got sick. And the prophylactic means you take the drug before you come down with symptoms. But what many people don't realize, I'm not even sure the president realizes it, is that you can't get it if you do not have symptoms, because orders have gone out to many of these state regulators of pharmacies that they are not to dispense the drug to people unless they have been diagnosed with and they're sick in the hospital. Now so in other words, they're keeping the drug from the very people who should have access to it, just as President Trump did. And that situation, I don't understand why we've allowed that situation to continue now for more than a month, since President Trump told the nation that he took it prophylactically, meaning to prevent getting the symptoms of the disease. And millions of people should have the same access to that drug that he did. And why don't they? You know, the drug is not expensive. It's not rare. It's readily available. Why can't people get it? And yet they can't. Now, you know, your listeners can check with their own doctor and see if they could go to their doctor and get the drug. And in many cases, in many parts of the country, they'll find out that they cannot do that. And that situation is wrong, and we're trying to call attention to that.
John, I want to switch gears so I don't lose you, and I'll make sure we put this up on social media. But I don't want to miss a chance to ask you about Seattle and the city, the urban problems. I mean, your family, your mother, the late Phyllis Schlafly, grew up just a few blocks from Portland Place. I don't know, 10 blocks, 20 blocks away from Portland Place, where the McCloskey's husband and wife stood with their weapons to defend themselves. I think, don't correct me if I'm wrong, isn't one of the extended Schlafly family lives right in that neighborhood,
yeah.
I think, but
Phyllis grew up was just one block from there. Maybe it was even half a block. So it was right around the corner. So yes, I'm very, very familiar with that neighborhood. I have cousins who, at least one cousin who lives right across the street from McCloskey in Portland Place, and I have other friends and relatives who live in nearby streets. It's a little unusual, but St. Louis has over 100 of private streets, which often have a gate, and the 20 or 30 homeowners own the entire street and are responsible for maintaining it and providing security. So when this mob of hundreds of people broke down the gate to march down the street in front of the McCloskey home, they were trespassing even when they were in the street. And the McCloskeys had every right to defend their property, and as he said, this came just days after they watched the 7-Eleven go up in flames with no police protection and no fire protection by a similar mob a couple of miles away in St. Louis.
So, John, what happened today in Seattle is they cleared the mayor finally cleared the Chaz or Chop or whatever. It looks like it was uneventful, the clearing out. The police went in. What's the answer, John? I mean, and I know you were young. It was in the late '60s, early '70s. You wouldn't have been necessarily as involved in politics as you are now and seen it. But are people going to reject the lawlessness, or are we at a different time? Should there be more clearing out of these cities? What's your feeling on this? What's happening?
Well, the question is, of course, Trump has issued an executive order, which I think he should have done it a couple weeks before he did, and there is a question of what it really applies to, or what it can be done if it isn't a federal property or federal jurisdiction. And then I believe that President Trump it's going to make it a campaign issue. The issue, though, is whether he'll be able to tag Joe Biden with the radicals in the Democratic Party. And people seem to have a benevolent approach to Joe Biden, as if he himself is relatively inoffensive. And you notice that just yesterday, he sort of made a half-hearted defense of the statues. He said he was not in favor of taking down these statues. And that's the first time that I can think of in the last few months that Joe Biden has, we used to speak of a sister soldier moment that Bill Clinton did. In other words, he separated himself from the radicals in the Democratic Party, and we'll see if that really lasts, because I really think that the radicals are in charge, and if he's elected, they will be in charge of the government.
I think you're right. John, unfortunately, I have to go. We ran out of time. You were talking too long about hydroxychloroquine. We got to run. We'll have John Schlafly back next week. As always, he is one half of the Schlafly Report over at townhall.com, and also all of his columns are archived at phyllisschlafly.com. We got to take a quick break and be right back. It's Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report. Be back in a moment.